I'll try to do my best. So, yeah, 10 years on from the Paris Agreement, we can see that it has made a difference. It remains a landmark in multilateralism and the global fight against climate change. In 2015, only a handful of countries had a national net zero target. Today, the EU recognizes climate change as an existential threat closely linked to global security, peace, and sustainable development. Europe has set out an ambitious framework to become a decarbonized economy by 2050. As highlighted in the Draghi report on the future of European competitiveness, decarbonization is not only crucial for the planet, but also a key driver of economic growth when integrated with industrial, competition, and trade policies. Hence, EU governments of member states should embed adaptation measures into their national energy and climate plans. Strong emergency coordination and recovery planning are just as important as physical upgrades. At a EU level, an intermediate 2030 target has already been set, as well as a climate neutrality by 2050 target, thanks to the regulation establishing the framework for achieving climate neutrality, also known as the European Climate Law. So the Commission's EU-wide assessment of the final updated national energy and climate plans shows today that the EU is currently on course to reduce net greenhouse gas emissions by around 54% by 2030, compared to 99 levels, if only member states implement fully existing and planned national measures and EU policies. They have to compare with their national plans. To achieve these goals, the EU considers necessary all zero and low carbon energy solutions, including renewable, nuclear, energy efficiency, storage, CCS, CCU, carbon removals, geothermal and hydro energy, and all other current, but also future net zero energy technologies to decarbonize the energy system by 2040 and then 2050. Energy efficiency, I'm sorry, not sure that it works. So energy efficiency is upheld by the EU thanks to, thank you, the energy efficiency first principle. So the energy efficiency first is also called EE first. And this principle is a cornerstone of the EU's climate and energy policy and is legally required actually under the Fit for 55 package. Well, maybe I need some help for the slides, I'm sorry. I will carry on. To achieve the transitions to climate neutrality of EU industry, many strategies and action plans have been elaborated already by the EU, aiming, for instance, to securing the Union as an attractive location for manufacturing. Thank you. Yes. Including for energy-intensive industries and promoting clean tech and new circular business models, but also aiming to strengthen the EU's energy independence from imported fossil fuels. In the clean industrial... Well, I don't know if it won't double because I'm comfortable with this one. No, it's okay. In the clean industrial deal, for instance, so legal certainty and coherence are pivotal to foster investments and allow producers to scale up and ultimately accelerating the growth of the sector. Low-carbon hydrogen will, for instance, support efforts to decarbonize sectors where electrification is currently not a viable option, such as aviation or shipping or certain industrial processes. And in the same time, transparent and regular reporting by member states, coupled with robust assessments by the Commission and mechanisms to ensure that progress is assessed, is essential to ensure that the EU remains on track towards achieving the EU 2050 climate neutrality objective. Finally, the EU has to gain its energy independence since it relied until a few years ago on major fuel suppliers such as Russia. This past summer, the EU has issued its 18th package of sanctions against Russia, and indeed, oil exports still represents 1/3 of the Russian government's revenues. Consequently, the EU strengthened its sanctions and restrictions on Russia's oil shadow fleet by targeting 105 additional vessels, bringing the total number of listed vessels to 444, along with both Russian and international companies managing the fleet. Imports of Russian refined petroleum products via third countries are banned, with limited exceptions, thereby preventing Russia's crude oil from reaching the EU market through the back door. Russia's Nord Stream 1 and 2 gas pipeline to Europe will be sanctioned as well through a transaction ban. The EU is also lowering the price cap for crude oil and introduces an automatic and dynamic mechanism to modify the oil price cap and then ensure that this price cap is effective. And lastly, regarding these sanctions, the Council decided to end the exemption for oil imports from Russia to Xesia in Europe. So this was a quick introduction that shows you how many different interests and subjects, how wide it is to talk about the EU energy policy as of today. I will show you later on, so a first part on adopted regulations and strategies. Of course, I won't tell you everything about every regulation or directive that has been voted and implemented the last 10 years. It will only be an overview, a quick overview with main themes. Then we will talk quickly about results of the previous EU regulations in figures. What are the challenges faced by the EU right now, and what are the expected regulation and strategies that can come up? But at the same time, also, it will be a very quick expected regulation and strategies because there are so many of them which are planned. And this week, Ursula von der Leyen has set up new strategies for the future in the State of the Union speech. So it's kind of impossible to tell you to be exhaustive, but we will try. So this is the adopted regulation and strategies, and you have 2 slides about it. So it's not even exhaustive, it's just a bit, but it shows you how many of them there are. So we can see that there is a first part before 2020, so between 2018 and 2021, a first package of text has been set, and it was already about renewable and internal market for electricity. Later on, the Fit for 55 package and the Green Deal has arrived, and so we can see that between 2022 and 2024, we have a lot of important regulations, major ones with the CSRD, the CBAM, which is very important and has also a diplomatic side, the EU batteries regulation, which has arrived in 2023, first directive or regulation that has been set before 2020 has been revised, so in 2023. And later on, we can see that 2024 and 2025 have arrived with their own packages. So major regulations also. We have the methane regulations, for instance, in 2024. Then in 2025, there is a different mindset that has arrived regarding the omnibus regulations. The omnibus regulations wishing to simplify all of the previous regulations because it was kind of too complicated for the SMEs in particular to handle. So here is a quick look to the previous regulations that has been taken since, well, for the last 10 years, the last decade. And what are the results of these previous EU regulations? Well, there is a bright side and there is a not so bright side. The bright side is very encouraging. Since 2013, the EU's emissions trading system generated more than 230 billion euros of revenues to be reinvested in climate and energy measures, including to address social aspects in lower and middle income households. So it's huge and it was meant to be huge. Between 2005 and 2022, total GHG emissions from buildings, for instance, has fell by 34%. So this kind of news is showing, demonstrating that our previous EU regulations work, and are effective. And a very recent example is that in June 2025, solar was the largest source of EU electricity for the first time ever. Wind power in the EU started the summer strongly, of course, with the highest ever generation for the months of May and June. But solar power generated 22.1% of the EU electricity in June 25, more than any other power sources in the EU. And this is actually an increase of 22% compared to June 2024. In a second place was nuclear, which was also decarbonized, and followed very closely by wind with 15.8%. At least during this summer, at least 13 EU countries recorded their highest ever months of solar generation. Record solar helped the EU power system to handle higher levels of demand, resulting from heat waves, because Europe has gone through a lot of heat waves this last summer, and those heat waves gripped the continent towards the end of June, and solar generation has helped go through this struggle. As a result of high renewable generation, coal generated the lowest ever share of EU electricity in June 2025. So renewable from one side, fuel on the other side, well, coal. And fossil fuels generated 23.6% of EU electricity in June 2025, so just above the record low of May 2024. And at the same time, which is very interesting, is that Spain, regarding coal, is approaching coal phase out. And this is the first EU country. So this is working. I mean, there is a will in the EU, and we tend to go towards decarbonization. This is kind of happening. Total fossil generation was also low in June, but has unfortunately increased over the first half of 2025, mainly due to unusually hydropower and wind generation and increasing demand at the same time. So coal generated just 6.1% of EU electricity in June 2025, and it's down from June 2024. But let's not be victorious yet, because there is a not so bright side. And despite this effective low in June, fossil generation in the first half of 2025, as I just said, was higher, 13% higher than in the first half of 2024, and mainly due to a higher level of gas generation, which increased by 19%. Additionally, as of 2024 and 2025, 1,700 gigawatts of renewables and storage projects were waiting to connect to the grid. So this is huge, and they were not connected to the grid, so they cannot decarbonize the industry. And this is due to an inefficient grid connection system. If European countries could connect all the renewable capacity currently waiting in line, it would have already exceeded its 2030 energy and climate targets. Consequently, it appears that many challenges remain. In these challenges, we can identify the basic challenges, of course, so address social, economic, and environmental impacts, enhancing the economy competitiveness, etc. But we can identify main topic. So the electricity demand, for instance, continues its upward trajectory. We have to understand that we will need more energy in the future, and this energy needs to be decarbonized at the same time. We cannot think that even with efficiency, there will be a less important demand in energy. And for instance, the use of energy for heating and cooling represents all of the EU's energy use. And with increasing temperatures and frequent heat waves, cooling is becoming a major energy security issue for citizens and the energy system as a whole. Another growing source of cooling, of course, of cooling demand is data centers. For the EU to achieve its objectives of energy security, affordability, competitiveness, and decarbonization, It is urgent to address energy system inefficiencies and other shortcomings, eliminating wasted energy and increasing smart integration between heating and cooling and power sectors. Then the EU needs also securing affordable and stable energy prices. So the Europe dependence, as we talked a bit earlier, on imported fossil fuels, is one of the main causes of high and volatile energy prices, worsened by international conflicts, which are complexifying energy supplies. So this is something that we have to address too, and adding battery storage and flexibility to extend the use of renewables, power into mornings and evenings, notably, will help keeping prices affordable. So it helps getting an independence and at the same time securing affordability and securing energy for consumers. In the same vein, of course, securing diplomatic relations, since many of critical raw materials that are essential for green transition and for EU resilience are sourced from outside the EU. So we have to be very careful with our diplomatic relations with the countries that are where we source these raw materials. Yeah, a little and quick point too about security and securing energy is address increasing risks to power infrastructure from extreme weather events. We talked a bit earlier about heat waves. It's a struggle for the energy grid, but not only. So this is a challenge to tackle also. We need to tackle carbon leakages in general, and the CBAM can be a solution regarding this one. And finally, the EU is currently facing an inefficient European grid connection system. So as just said earlier, there is a lot of energy waiting to be connected to the grid, and this is actually delaying projects, discouraging investors in the EU, while there are grid and interconnections are crucial for the well-functioning of the EU electricity market. So this is something to take into consideration also, and it must lead to a better work between the national parts and the EU organization. So what are the expected regulations and strategies to tackle these challenges? I'm going to be quick also regarding this one. So, for instance, a new delegated act for low hydrogen and fuel producers, low carbon hydrogen, but also an industrial decarbonization accelerator act, IDAA, which aims to foster competitive, sustainable and resilient productions in energy-intensive industries in the EU, which are the most difficult industries to decarbonize as of today. These are supposed to happen in the current of 2025. The EU climate law, which is existing today, should be amended by the end of 2026, this year or early 2026, sorry. There is a coming EU grids package also. Some new plans are coming, so a sustainable transport investment plan, an affordable energy action plan, which has already announced a heating and cooling strategy for the first quarter of 2026. Also, what is expected in the future regarding carbon storage, because carbon storage is considered as one of the future solutions for decarbonizing our industry, while the Net Zero Industry Act, which already exists, sets the union level objective of reaching an injection capacity of 50 million tons of CO2 per year, and all storage sites shall be designed by member states to operate for a minimum of 5 years. So this is coming. And regarding a more diplomatic and securing our fuel sources issue, so I just talked in the introduction about the sanctions against Russia. Well, the EU should ban long-term contracts for oil and gas from Russia, which can be tricky because contracts, as all of you know, have disposition, and if you end the contract before the termination, The termination in the contract, it can lead to some problems in courts, and especially in Russian courts. But the EU is trying to organize it and find some solution and legal solution for it. And just some figures also, cross-border transport and energy networks are due to receive 81.4 billion euros in EU funding between 2028 and 2034, and this is funding for power and hydrogen infrastructure, and it's planned for increasing fivefold compared to the previous budget. So these are some figures. I told you that I couldn't be exhaustive, so I tried to be quick, but I hope it can show you how diverse, how vast, how wide this overview is. But there is hope for the future. It's going on the right path. We still have many, many efforts and endeavors to do, but the EU Commission tries to tend towards such decarbonization, and in order to achieve our 2030, then 2040, and finally 2050 goals and targets. So yeah, I hope this has allowed you to dive into the topic of today's conference. Thank you very much for listening.